Welcome everybody tonight to a series of meetings that we're going to have. The first one will be the Community Development meeting for Monday, February 27th, 2023. I'm calling Community Development Committee to order. We have two items on the agenda. The first item is the approval of the Community Development meeting minutes from February 13th, 2023. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Oswald, seconded by
Mitchell.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item 2 is a matter of a rezoning request for 300 4th Street from business downtown district to residential multi-household low density district. Referred by the Keystone Recovery Group. Mr. Hammonds, please. Just come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, sir.
Yes, my name is Rick Hammond. The address is 300 4th Street, Elyria, Ohio, 44035.
Yeah, just go ahead and tell us anything you want.
Excuse me?
Yes, go ahead and describe your situation or...
Basically, we were just advised prior to coming to this meeting, our attorney wasn't able to make it March 13th at 6 o'clock.
So you're asking the committee to table this item to March 13th at 6 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Law Director Bruning?
Yeah. Counsel isn't present. I strongly advise that we table this matter until counsel can be here to represent his client in this. So if he's requesting it to March 13th meeting, I would suggest you go ahead and place that on the agenda.
Okay, Mr. Hammonds, we will schedule this meeting. It'll be tabled till 6 p.m. on Monday, March 13th. And you said your attorney would be present?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd ask Mr. Stewart to please call Finance.
I'll call Finance to order.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. We have 5 items on the agenda. The first is the approval of the joint meeting minutes from February 13th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Sarah, seconded by Mr. Schneider.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. The second item is the matter of an economic development agreement with Eaton Point LLC. This matter was passed in committee, but did not pass full council. A Safety Service Director, Mr. Lundy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We want this to be an informative night for council with the hope that we can address your questions and concerns. I understand this has been a long and winding road to get here. The city has annexed the property in question. The city's approved zoning for the development. Lot splits have been approved, and also Planning Commission has approved the project. The next bridge for us to cross is the Economic Development Agreement, which is before the city and includes TIF incentives. But to cross that bridge, we're here tonight to assist you with questions that you have about traffic in the development area. We had asked engineering to furnish to you several items. Those items include the ODOT letter of February 2020 concerning the right-in and right-out access. Another item that we provided is the Chestnut Commons Connections Feasibility Study, with the most relevant information being found on page 7, and the traffic study by TMS engineers dated December of 2019. This is a study that was reviewed by ODOT, triggering their letter of February 2020, which you also received. To address questions around these studies, we've asked the following to be here tonight. Andy Comer with TMS Engineers, representatives of ABC Development, Greg Slyman and Bob Achari. From our team will be the city engineer, Kathy McKillips, also Larry Showalter with Communications, and Don Culbert, who can elaborate more on the actual economic development agreement. We want to begin tonight with Andy Comer to talk about the traffic study that was done by TMS Engineers. Mr. Comer, if you would please come forward.
Yes, yes. Mr. Bruning, Assistant Law Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make it real clear what we're here for. I think there's been a lot of confusion with the last couple of meetings, and Director Lundy did succinctly, state what the history of this project is, but I want to remind the committees that this is here to approve or to discuss, converse about the economic development agreement. Obviously, the development itself and the traffic patterns are a component of that you're going to want to consider and take into account, but the matter before you is really on whether or not you want to pass the matter of the economic development agreement and the obligations that the city will undertake in accordance with that economic development agreement, essentially providing economic incentives to the developer to facilitate this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, just please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Andy Comer. The address is 2112 Case Parkway South, Twinsburg, Ohio.
Go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Andy Comer. I'm a senior traffic engineer with TMS Engineers. We prepared the traffic impact study for the proposed development at the southeast corner of State Route 57 in Chestnut Commons and Chestnut Ridge. The study began in 2018 and was completed in early 2020. We had gone through several revisions through discussions with ODOT and their review of the project. As a summary of the study, we looked at the initial 30-some acres at full build with 9 land uses developed on the site, including a gas station, convenience market, as well as the grocery store. We collected traffic count data at the adjacent intersections as well as at the interchange ramps down at State Route 10. From there, we took the traffic data we collected and we forecasted it to opening and design year traffic. 2 major components of that is determining a growth rate. We collected NOACA supplied traffic data that we were able to use from their model to forecast the future background growth of the traffic in the study area. From there, we also applied design hour factors. Our traffic count data was collected on one day in the year. We don't want to design for one specific day. Could be under-designed, could be over-designed depending on the day of the year. Engineering standard in traffic studies is to forecast that to the 30th highest hour of the year. ODOT provides a methodology and factors for what they call the design hour factor, and we applied those to the volumes. That allowed us to forecast our no-build conditions. We then do a no-build conditions analysis to see how things are operating in those opening and design year conditions. The study found that the intersections were operating with poor levels of service. Levels of services are how we grade intersections, A to F. A, almost no delay. You come to the intersection, you make your movement, you're on your way. F, you're experiencing high congestion. They're very similar to school grades. A through C, we consider acceptable. ODOT considers D acceptable. After D, you want to start beginning to look at improvements and mitigation to improve those levels of service, E's and F's. We had found that the intersections were experiencing poor level of service under those no-build conditions. We then based our improvements and mitigation on a 2016 safety study that ODOT had conducted, prepared by Manick and Smith. Their preferred alternative included some Michigan lefts north and south of the intersection, limiting left turns at the 57 and Chestnut Ridge intersection, as well as roundabouts and additional lanes in the small corridor between the 2 signalized intersections. From there, once we analyze what those improvements, we then want to analyze our build conditions. We want to add the traffic that we forecasted for the development on top of that, see if those improvements are enough to continue to maintain acceptable level of service, or if additional improvements are then merited by the development. We've then found some additional turn lanes and such to piggyback on top of those. Through our process with ODOT as well, we actually looked at 4 improvement scenarios. basically a no access to 57 scenario that ODOT asked because ODOT controls the access rights to 57. What we had considered to be an access to 57, and as well as a limited right-in, right-out access scenario, where anybody that then wanted to go south from the development's 57 access could use one of the Michigan left turn, U-turn locations as well as south. So from there, we completed that analysis, had some additional recommendations, and then we also, at the request of ODOT, then analyzed a 50-plus acre area to the south and east as well to give ODOT kind of an overall picture of the full area, and what they call a future consideration analysis that they would have in their report as well, that as the area gets built out, they could then look back and see. So that's a brief scenario of the study that was undertaken. Be happy to discuss any specifics or ask any questions. That concludes the summary.
Okay, thank you so much. At this point, does anybody on the panel, either committee, have any questions?
I do. Just to confirm, so the study was conducted in 2018 initially, and still concluding, and then concluded in 2020?
Yes, we conducted our traffic. Our study begins with the traffic count data collection. That was conducted in June of 2018. Through various revisions, discussions with ODOT, we issued a final report in late 2019, early 2020.
So at this point, I guess my question would be is that since this project was having restarted those conversations about the redevelopment, how come we did not do another traffic impact study to update it from 2020 to 2022? I don't know if that's something that you can speak to, or the engineer, or the developer.
Well, one thing I can say is March of 2020, when the pandemic began, traffic counts severely took a drop. So any data collection at that point, ODOT was mandating that you compare any pandemic counted traffic data to the previous data, and then basically apply a factor to bring it back to that level. So any data collection over the course of the pandemic through 2020 and 2021 would have just reverted back to this data that we've collected. Only in the last probably 12 months has ODOT stopped requiring that adjustment factor calculation to be performed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was hoping we'd get to see the development plan up there, because the one question I had was the entrance going in, which is right by Panera, which is just real close to Route 57. Is that in the new, when we do that, is that going to stay there, or is that going to move east? Because that seems like the short area, you know, for cars coming in and not be able to follow through and backing up to 57. Thank you.
Right now, I believe the entrance is going to stay where it is. It's part of the signalized entrance with Chestnut Commons. We wouldn't want to create another signalized intersection in that corridor and then end up with three. So from a standpoint of locating them together and across from each other and an access management standpoint, that alignment is preferred. Obviously, the spacing to State Route 57 is far less than ideal with the proximity. But when you start offsetting approaches, you start getting overlapping left turn lanes and conflicts in that manner as well. So we would, from an access management standpoint, prefer the main accesses remain aligned.
Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So then, not remembering exactly, but then further down, when you would go in at the end, which is across from the bank entrance, if you wanted to enter or come out of that entrance from the bank across the street, is there going to be a signal there?
Are you further to the east, the secondary entrance? No, there would not be a traffic signal there. The placement of traffic signals is you follow the Ohio Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and they have specific criteria related to volumes, pedestrians, crashes, things like that. And that secondary driveway would not warrant traffic signal control based on the volumes that we showed using it.
So when you're coming out of, let's say the Sheets was on the corner and you're coming out heading north, would you be able to turn left, or it would be only a right turn out?
From the second access to the east? you'd be able to turn left, you would experience higher delay because it's an unsignalized intersection, so you would have to wait for gaps in both the eastbound and the westbound traffic.
So that's
So-
gonna be an issue, right?
Most people would probably prefer to use a traffic signal and have a protected turn movement under the control of the signal.
Is there even a possibility of a controlled light there, or that will never happen? Right at the intersection I was just talking about.
So if we're talking about the same intersection, there's a traffic signal there right now at Chestnut Commons Drive.
No, further.
Further east. To get a traffic signal there, you'd have to increase the volume of traffic using that driveway, which would mean you'd probably have to share that access with additional development. From a traffic engineering standpoint, the spacing is less than ideal. We would have to do a system analysis to see how they interact and can be timed together to create platoons and move traffic through. But just on that short distance, probably would not be advisable.
So, sorry, I got so many questions. So when I was across so I'm in the parking lot of Panera's, and I wanna, at the light, I wanna pull out and turn left or right, or go straight through to Walmart. So I took that route. And so one light, I had one stop sign, and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30, so it wasn't real busy, but some traffic. Went down, took the curve around Walmart, went out to Connector Road, turned left down Sugar Ridge. It wasn't a bad road. And then if I even wanted to get further out onto 57, because now Sugar Ridge is going to get packed with cars, I thought, well, I'll go down all the way to Taylor. So it's going to just keep continuing, but I think there's going to be ways that people will start using their routes, but it'll get congested on the east end of the development that I'm talking about. That you said we won't be able to put light. So that's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Any further questions? Mrs. Davis?
Through you, Chair. Also, you stated that, in 2016, that was it another traffic study done in 2016?
Yes, there was a safety study prepared. The safety study was prepared by a firm of the name of Mannequin Smith, I believe, through ODOT. ODOT identifies high crash locations at the state and will at times conduct studies to see what can be done, what can be done to improve the crash rates on their roadways. So that study specifically looked at the 57 corridor and then included the Chestnut Commons Drive because of its close proximity.
Through you, Chair. Also, you stated that they was recommending 4 improvements at that time? Did you say there was 4 improvements that they asked you?
There was multiple improvements. I'd have to go through the study and count each individual one, but there was at least 4. We had actually looked at 4 various scenarios in the course of our study, I believe is the 4 I was referencing.
So in those improvements, through you, Chair, have we done them, or we need to know what they are? Have they been implemented?
I do not know if they've been implemented. I don't believe the major geometric improvements like the Michigan left turns and the restriction of left turns have been completed. One of the smaller recommendations in the report was to eliminate the split phasing of the traffic signal at Chestnut Commons. I'm not aware if those have been done at this time or since the study had been issued.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Corbin?
I have received another dozen telephone calls about the congestion at Chestnut Commons since Kevin's report in the Chronicle the other day. In reading the traffic input study here, I do have a couple of questions. The right in, right out, northbound U-turn, is that what you would call, what I would call a Michigan left turn?
I believe so, yes. So there would be 2 Michigan left turns in the improvements area. One north of one north of Chestnut Ridge and one south.
And
That would eliminate the left turns at the 57 and Chestnut Ridge intersection. They would only be able to go through or right. And they would go up and use
So
those
that
two
was my
locations.
second question. The left turn arrow turning left from Chestnut Commons onto 57 South, or from Chestnut Commons headed east, wanting to go north, those two directional arrows would be eliminated.
Correct, as well as the north-south lefts.
Thank you.
So we don't only have through and right turn movements at the intersection. To give you a little background on that reasoning, the intersection and the signal timing is kind of like a pie, and everybody that uses the intersection wants a slice of the pie. And if we can't give everybody at the intersection an equal amount of time. But like left turns require more because they require a gap in traffic than say through traffic, and right turn traffic because they have no opposite movement to yield their right of way. So the left turns take up a significant amount of time in the cycle, as well as a significant amount of delay because of that yield to the opposing through traffic movement. So the emphasis behind that improvement is to eliminate the need for left turns at the intersection and do them as the U-turn movements north and south, and then to bring them back through. They still come through the intersection. They actually make two movements, but they're both unopposed from a right-of-way yielding standpoint.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Mrs. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. On page 7 of the traffic analysis, it has the level of service, and one thing it has stop condition, LOS F, year design, LOS F. Can you explain what that means? I mean, I understand the letter grade of F, but what do those mean exactly?
So the first component of that is the delay. The delay is when you come up to an intersection, how long do you wait? Okay. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, Federal Highway, have determined that certain amounts of delay are acceptable. And then at a certain point, that delay starts to become less acceptable. And then at a certain point, it's no longer acceptable and something should be done to lessen it. So there's delay thresholds in the actual amount, and it's measured in seconds. Now, it's average per car at the intersection. So when we analyze it, some movements might only have 15 seconds of delay, other movements might have 50 seconds of delay. And then we also look at approach and the intersection as a whole. And then, so when we give it a level of service F, we're saying the intersection or that movement, whichever that F is assigned to, is failing. That some mitigation should be investigated because people are waiting very long. And then in conjunction with the poor levels of service, a lot of times poor levels of service also lead to safety issues because the longer you wait, you start to maybe take a chance on a smaller gap in traffic, or you pull out of your lane into a different lane, and you start to make rush decisions because you've waited so long. So the congestion aspect of it leads to the safety aspect with those grades to looking to then follow it up with some kind of improvements or mitigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So knowing that the intersection is an F and the other thing is an F, we're going to add more traffic on top of that. So how do we get around that? I mean, what's your plan to alleviate all that traffic that is currently at an F?
The plan is the recommended improvements in the report, the no-build improvements that were analyzed, the elimination of left turns, the Michigan left turns, providing the access to 57. The north access north of Walmart was not included in the study as it hadn't been constructed or included. That provides an alternative route in and out of the study area as well. So you're either you have improvements kind of fall into two categories. You're either looking to add capacity at the intersection, which is typically adding lanes, or in signalized intersections trying to improve the signal timing, or you have to then look into trying to reroute traffic through alternate access points or provide alternative alternative routes of traffic ingress and egress to the area.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one more question. So will these things be implemented before sheets and all these go in? Or will it happen after they're already there? Because either way, when you start trying to mitigate those concerns, you've got a hot mess on your hands.
That's correct, and I don't know when they would be implemented.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'd say thank you, but please hang around in case we need you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Okay. And I see, okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on Mrs. Mitchell's question regarding page 7. The page 7 that you received is from the KS Associates Traffic Feasibility Study for the Reeser Point Crossing Connector Road project. And the level of service F is referring to the intersection of Sugar Lane, East Broad Street, Sugar Ridge, East Broad Street and the connector road. So when you're looking at that chart on page 7 there, and it says stop condition, level of service F, that's basically stating that that intersection cannot work with just a stop sign on the connector road, which is why today we have a signalized intersection there. And that brings it up to a level B. I just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so this traffic analysis that you all gave us has nothing to do with Chestnut Commons?
Only the page 7, the one that says KS Associates at the top, that one was submitted and provided to you just because it shows that the connector road was projected to remove 20% of the traffic going to Walmart and take it directly to East Broad Street.
I see.
And our traffic counts that we took last fall and last August of 2022 pretty much, confirms that projected 20%, because we calculated roughly 21% of the traffic is now utilizing that roadway instead of heading towards Chestnut Ridge Road. And that's the only reason why that page was submitted to you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schneider, did you want to weigh in? Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lundy?
Yes. No, we had asked representatives of the engineering department to be here today to kind of also explain, I know questions were raised about the ODOT letter. We already made the reference to the alternate entranceway there. It's now Reeser Parkway. But, so I just wanted to have, I guess, Kathy kind of walk you through a little bit that ODOT letter, Kathy and John, because the question keeps coming in up about this right in and right out, and I think there's some confusion as to whether that's final approval by ODOT or not. So if you could explain that further.
Mr. Schneider, before you weigh in on that, do we have an exhibit? I mean, the conceptual plan that shows this? I mean, I know we're talking about, the right in, the right out, but the one that was presented to this committee 2 weeks ago when this initially was voted on there, they talked about these opportunities coming up and through. I think it'd just be only, so if we could take a look at actually what's being talked about instead of going back off of memory. Do we have any opportunities for that, a conceptual plan that's here?
Yeah, zip drive.
Yeah.
So to get our bearings, Chestnut Ridge Road, and Route 57 on the bottom, the sheets, then the Aldi, which is our phase 1. The roadway improvements would go back to approximately this point currently, which is what the current development agreement in front of you is for tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I may, through you, so where are you proposing the right in, right out on Route 57? Can you show us that?
Yeah, it's the traffic, the light currently right here. Right now, based on the TMS study of 55 acres, ODOT approved the right in, right out at this location. Now, in our discussions with ODOT and the city, when phase 2 goes in and the rest of this development goes, this is going to need to be full access, traffic signalized. The location of this just happens to be also right between Chestnut Ridge Road and Route 10, the exit ramp. So it's right in the middle of that. So the location has been approved. Now we just have to go back to ODOT when we do phase 2 and get that to be full access instead of just right in, right out.
And again, this is just all confirmed about the way that this is laid out here in front of us up to the phase 1 line. In the event that phase 2 does take off and move forward with a development moving south, the right in, right only, right in, right out would be, forgive me, at this particular time or at a future date with phase 2?
It'll be phase 2. When we do phase 2, as Greg mentioned 2 weeks ago, that we're about 36 months away from phase 2 work. We're going to have to update the traffic study by then for sure. And there'll be new accounts. We've talked to TMS about it. So that's going to have to be updated. At that time, when we go back to ODOT for that future development, we would seek full access on Route 57.
And again, I know that this is only for the development agreement for conversations over and through, but then this talks about the capacity sewer that's going to be coming in from the southeast interceptor sewer. If Ms. McKillips or Mr. Schneider have an idea of where that's going to be coming through eventually and where that stands. I mean, I know this is an overall general plan, and I know, I don't want to say we get lost in the weeds, but this is important because this is the overall general plan of this development and what is the forecast moving forward with this. You're talking was it 36 months for phase 2, give or take?
Yeah, that's our estimate currently.
So, I mean, to me, where's that sewer at now? Where is the plans at for that development of that sewer? Is it in the works? Because how far is that coming along and I know that we applied for a grant, I believe, and I don't know if we received that grant or where that's at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say that the design of the sewer has been completed. It's been on the shelf for a while. I don't know exactly where it is going to cross, but it's somewhere in this approximate area right here. We have easements already established on the west side. So it's just a matter of getting the funds to actually construct. And one of the things if possible, it'd be nice to utilize the TIFs, or unless we can get some EPA funding. So either one, and that would be welcome.
Sure.
Mr. Corbin?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Nothing from what I have heard or seen tonight is a solution to the existing traffic issue that we have. This new development will do nothing but bring additional traffic. I like some of what I have heard about addressing that, but I think the issue before us is the existing traffic that we have to have a resolution for before we can put a phase 1 or phase 2 in. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Corbin. Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you could move that picture a little bit so I can see, so I can kind of explain it. Yep, okay, now push it up. Okay, that's good. All right, so when we're looking at putting in that road that's going to go through Sheets, Aldi's, how is that going to go all the way back to where the exit would come out on 57? And at that point, would that all be in that construction agreement with that right in, right out, right off the bat? Or are you saying that right in, right out won't even happen until the second phase? Because if you did it right now, I would be more apt to say this is a good idea because you're taking that traffic coming in, going from the back way rather than all the traffic coming in from Chestnut. So it seems to me that that kind of has to work right now, and then we could alleviate a lot of that traffic. And then even if they're coming out, then they're going straight through and they're not doing a right-hand turn, they're just going through the intersection. So where exactly will that road be going on this first agreement?
In phase one, we're just going off of Chestnut Ridge south to just south of Aldi's. So right about here would be a cul-de-sac.
And so the balance would be in the next phase?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason we can't get the right in, right out and take it all the way down, first of all, the funding isn't there with the TIF without the other development. And ODOT only approved the right in, right out currently in the TMS plan that showed the phase 2 development. So we won't get the warrants and the approval from ODOT for the right in, right out without the future development.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, so we're gonna have an issue until phase 2 goes in, is what I'm saying. Just my thought, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Assistant Law Director Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I'm looking at this for the first time. John or Kathy, I don't know if you want to correct me if I'm not reading it correctly, but this February 27th letter from ODOT looks like it would grant a variance for that right in, right out, but it looks like it's contingent on also doing the northbound median U-turn, which is the Michigan left. Is that right? So all of that would have to go in together. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not just going in phase 2, it's also with these other improvements that I assume would be more city-sponsored improvements. I don't know. There's no plans for that yet, is that right?
Yeah, there's no design plans for the Michigan lefts or any of that at this time.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Lundy?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess, as I said tonight, we wanted to try to answer questions concerning the traffic concerns that the council has too, and I guess we also, if you feel like those questions have been answered, we also wanted to have the opportunity for Don Culver to explain to the economic development agreement that's before council.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, while Ms. Calvert is coming, if I may ask Mr. Schneider a question. So help me understand, in phase 2, if all this other stuff happens, people coming off of Route 10 on the Route 57 are gonna be coming off the exit and hit a stoplight?
Yes. Yes, that would be the design.
And then they go a little bit further and hit another stoplight?
Yes. One of the things you would take into consideration is you would, a typical intersection, you have 4 legs. This would not have 4 legs. This would have 3 legs, you would say.
Have you ever seen people come off of Route 10?
Yes, I've done it before, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the development agreement goes, I did want to explain some key points. As a reminder, the project is the construction of an Aldi's grocery store and a Sheetz gas station. The Aldi's would be about 20,644 square feet with an estimated construction cost of $3.5 million and an estimated value of $4.5 million. And upon completion, it would create 11 new full-time jobs and 9 part-time jobs with an annual payroll of $600,000. The Sheetz would be a little over 6,000 square feet with estimated construction costs of $4.5 million and estimated value of $6 million. with 18 new full-time jobs and 18 part-time jobs, and annual payroll of approximately $720,000. So that is the project that the development project that we're specifically referring to today as part of this agreement. The TIF that we are proposing would go to assist with the development costs for the public infrastructure. It is a little different than some of the TIFs we've done in the past, where this one is created in such a way as the developer would be enabled to build the road to public specs, and we would essentially buy that road later on down the road. So that's why if you read through the development agreement, it's a little bit complicated in how it reads as to what the city's obligations are and what the purchase price is. The purchase price has been limited to $1 million, the lesser of $1 million, or the total cost of construction, and it would be equal to the bond issuance that the finance director would have approval for. So this is because the TIF we need to know have a better sense of what the value of the Sheetz and Aldi's would be for that incremental value that we would use to pay for that infrastructure. The developer has guaranteed minimum service payments, so that's a little bit different than what we typically do with special assessments. In this scenario, basically we come to agreement with the purchase cost that's approved by the finance director, and whatever the TIFs would produce, the developer would guarantee that payment equal to whatever that purchase price was. So it's pretty secure and locked up, and I know the finance director could probably talk about that a little bit more on how that would work. The alternative is we wanted to put, because we don't know exactly what that valuation would be right now, the other alternative is something called a pay-as-you-go TIF. So you'll see that written in there, where we would basically put the TIF in place, and as the increment value is collected over the course of each year, we would then distribute that to the developer for payment. So there would be no bond issuance in that instance. It is what is referred to a pay-as-you-go TIF. And we would charge a 1% administrative fee to be able to work on that over the course of time. It is a 75% 10-year TIF agreement. So there is school board notification, but no school board requirement on that. The developer would agree to warranty the road for a period of 1 year after construction.
One quick question, Ms. Cowart. School board, is that 100% Midview schools?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second.
Yeah, well, I mean, in that area, that could be Midview schools or Elyria schools. I mean, is it both school systems, Midview and Elyria, or strictly just Midview?
It is, I believe it's strictly Midview. Do I have that right, Director Pulaski?
That's
correct. Small portion
I can
of
answer
city?
that. It is Midview.
It is Midview. Okay. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd have a question, a further question. In terms of the economic development agreement, I just want to make sure this is clear, that this is strictly just for phase one, which includes the Sheetz and Aldi's, nothing else.
Correct. It is limited strictly to the Sheetz and Aldi's.
Okay. And in terms of the agreement then, that's where it ends? No possibility of a phase two, it's just there's a possible phase two in the future?
Correct. If we would have to come before council to do anything additional beyond the Sheetz and the Aldi's and the public infrastructure to support that project specifically.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sarah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure who can answer, if anybody can. How much new volume of traffic do we anticipate this creating, actually? Or is it just going to be more of servicing the people that are already in that area, traffic-wise?
I would have to defer to the engineers that we have for direct statistics, but this is something that we've discussed in the past, that this this specific development of a Sheetz and an Aldi's is most likely going to benefit the people in that area who are already traveling to that area. To what extent, I cannot tell you exactly, but gas stations and grocery stores typically are neighborhood services provided close to where you live and do not have travelers, coming from far away for those types of developments. I don't know if there's somebody from engineering that can speak to, more specific statistics on that than I can.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll try to speak a little bit to the site-generated traffic. Two things to keep in mind when we analyze this development is the trips to a development fall under two categories. We consider trips to either be a new trip, meaning it's your primary trip. You leave home, you drive to work, you drive home. That's a primary trip, a new trip. The other category of trip is a pass-by trip, and that's a vehicle that's already on the roadway that may make an intermediate stop at a different land use. In this example, you're on your way to work, you stop at Sheetz to get your coffee and your gas, and then you continue on your way to work. In the trip generation, the land use for the gas station, the data is from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They compile these trip generation manual that's a series of studies of similar developments that we use to forecast the traffic. From that traffic, they estimate that approximately 75% of a gas station convenience market site-generated traffic is a pass-by trip that is already on the roadway. So those vehicles will still be making turn movements and still be using into the driveway, but they're being pulled off of Chestnut Ridge and off of State Route 57. The grocery store is lower, but it still has a pass-by component in approximately the 20% range of the total trips. When we looked at it, the new site-generated traffic from the Sheetz and the grocery store, in our report, that encompassed 25% of the total new traffic that we had attributed to the full development of the site. So these two developments were expected to contribute about 25% of that new traffic. I can grab the number out of the report here for you in a second. And then the pass-by was almost 85% in the AM and about 63% in the PM of those total trips. So these two developments are contributing heavily to the pass-by component and about 25% of the new trip. And just to kind of give you the rough total, so the full build-out of the site in the AM peak hour of the adjacent street, so that's when traffic on Chestnut Ridge and 57 are at the highest in the morning, we had approximately a total of 520 driveway volumes entering and 350 some exiting, 355 exiting. So the full build out of the site with the other land uses was about 800 driveway trips in the morning, with the component of pass by and new equaling that total. The PM peak hour, it was about 500 entering and 500 exiting. So there'd be some math to pull out the exact numbers of which, but about 25% of that new trips would be directly attributed to these two sites. And then new trips, so just for an example of the AM peak hour, the total driveway volumes was 520. 360 would be new, 160 would be pass by. So that data is in the report. I could read those numbers if you'd like, but we also provide them as well. Without going into the weeds a little bit, but it's available. If you want the sheets in the report, I can give you the page numbers as well.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Davis.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
First off, So you did this study during COVID, which COVID, the traffic was 18 to 20. COVID was, a lot of people was not on the road. Then second off, when you talk about 25% more, when you shutting down all this on the south side of town, that's 100% of the people from the south side is gonna have to drive all the way over on this side of town to go to Artist. That's not 25%. Did you take in consideration you shutting down a grocery store and that the traffic from over there gonna have to come all the way over to Chestnut?
No, that was not factored in the trip generation calculations.
Thank you.
To your first comment, though, the traffic data was collected pre-COVID. The analysis and the generation of the report was conducted all prior to the advent of the pandemic. So the data was pre-COVID that we collected. Was not impacted by the pandemic in the report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lippian.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Didn't you say at a previous meeting that the Aldi's contract was extended recently and that it would extend beyond the opening of what would be this Aldi's in the Chestnut Commons area and that it would overlap?
And in the meantime, it's also, I believe, in the, it's also in the development agreement where there's the terminology escapes me, but it's like a good faith effort where we're working with the city to backfill that existing space that eventually probably would be vacated by Aldi's. But there was a new 5-year extension on that existing Aldi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. When you say backfill that vacant space, are you referring to the Aldi's that's currently in the
Yeah, I'm
south side?
sorry. Yeah. The current Aldi has a 5-year extension. In the meantime, we're working with tenants that would be interested if Aldi does vacate, then we would backfill that space with another food user.
Okay, so it's a contingency plan, and contingent upon Aldi's vacating that space, you agree to backfill that with another place, another employer, another business?
We're working with different, in fact, we've already, and Greg, you can speak to this, but we've already shown that space to potential food users. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're working in good faith. We can't promise it could happen, but we're working in good faith to backfill that. We understand the concern.
Well, it's a contingency plan. I'm thankful that you've given it thought and consideration and that you're working towards it. Something more concrete would be of comfort, but I'm also, you said there's another gentleman that's...
Greg Simon, partner.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder.
Through you, Mr. Chair. On this new plan, or the first phase plan, are you relocating the driveway that goes to Panera Mattress Firm and the KFC back further from Chestnut Ridge? It looks like it on the map.
We are not. We are in discussion with them to relocate that to the south.
Okay.
We've been discussing that with the city as well as the owner of that property. We've been actually in touch with not only the landlord, but the Panera people as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Corbin.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. A comment that I got from one of my constituents this week was, if you can't get to Sheetz and Aldi, and once you get there, if you can't get out of there to get home, they'll find someplace else to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Any further questions? Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the people that did the traffic study, yeah, you're up again. And I know, when you do these studies, you have to kind of think independently and, who's generating the payment. So anyhow, that being said, how confident are you that this is going to work? Implementing these ideas, so that we don't have a traffic issue. Once these things are in, these different four ideas of signalizing and left in and left, right in, right out. And, you know, do you feel confident that we're going to be able to take care of the problem on this first phase?
Well, I believe the full gamut of the improvements, the Michigan left turns, the signal improvements, the improvements at Chestnut Commons, I'm confident those would work, based on the analysis results of the study. That's how we do things, and that's how we believe. Now, the study is only as good as the data put into it. So as long as the site traffic volume, you know, is built out in a similar fashion to how we forecasted the site, then yes, I'm fairly confident, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, I know coming off Route 10 and having a stoplight, Mrs. Mitchell, is going to be tough, but I know you go through a lot of cities and you do get that, a lot of signals in a row. And I kind of feel confident that if we can get to that phase where we can get that road out, that's when we'll really clean up the problems. I don't think we're going to have an issue. I think we are going to have some people that are a little annoyed in the beginning. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
I think it's important to note that any new signals along 57 that are constructed, ODOT's going to require those to be what we term interconnected to each other. So they would be, there's a multitude of ways to connect them, but they communicate with each other to provide a progressive signalization through the corridor. That way we move platoons through for people to do the speed limit. That's how they're timed and programmed, but ideally they would be programmed. The programming and the timings would be upkept to meet the traffic demands. The software and the equipment would be able to make those decisions in the field and adjust the timings to keep, you know, so as you progress down the roadway, you would encounter green ball indications at each intersection as you get there. Now, if you enter mid-block and unsignalized things, that's where you kind of come off. But if you travel the length of the corridor, at that point they would be connected. So we would want to, any signals north and south of Chestnut Ridge, we would want interconnected and communicating with Chestnut Ridge to function as what we would call a signal system, as well as the Chestnut Commons signal on Chestnut Ridge as part of that system.
Okay, I saw Mr. Sarah, and then after Mr. Sarah, it'll be Mrs. Mitchell.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like ODOT is a little bit more reactive than proactive when it comes to these kind of projects. Going forward, and I don't know if our engineers can answer or not, if we do get to phase 2, is that something that ODOT would help with financially to put those intersections in?
ODOT has various funding available. It's on a competition basis usually. Safety funding for high crash locations, CMAQ, congestion and mitigation air quality funding as well for traffic signal improvements can sometimes be used when you're trying to reduce congestion in areas. So there are funding options available. You would have to discuss with them and apply and go through their process, but I can't speak to whether you would receive them or the eligibility at this point, but there are sources out there through ODOT.
Through you, Mr. Chair, but the need has to be shown first?
Yes, the need has to be shown, and that you have the 2016 study, safety study that they commissioned, as well as you have a traffic study for the development that piggybacked on top of that, and then any future studies that may be done or traffic count data would also fall into that. So those are things they would look at and take into account. They usually weight heavily that previous engineering type work's been done in a project when they look at those kind of things.
Thank you.
Assistant Law Director Bruning.
While you're up there, I just want to check here. So we've been talking about ODOT a lot. Isn't that also US Route 20 there? And does the US Department of Transportation have any input into any of this? And has that been addressed?
I believe ODOT would have control through their home rule aspect.
Thank you. Mrs. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Please help me remember, so the signals coming off of, on Route 10, you're going to put a signal there. Is that phase 1 or 2?
We recommended traffic signals at those locations. Those locations right now are maintained by ODOT because they're in the township. ODOT typically will not install a traffic signal until you actually have an actual traffic count at the time. So typically in studies, when you forecast the need for a traffic study, they'll then collect data or have data collected at that time to verify the need because they don't want to put up unwarranted traffic signals.
So you said all of that to say it'll be phase two?
Well, they're the ones warranted under existing conditions from our data, and then the other one warrants under one of the future no-build conditions. So most likely, they're not big on installing traffic signals if they don't have to. Traffic signals do tend to increase crash rates with rear ends and things like that. So they want to make sure that they've covered all bases and that it is a need and that it is warranted before they will they'll go through with it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so having said all of that, will the development already be in place in order for you to get that traffic data? Is that correct? I mean, you can't analyze the data if there's nothing there to get data from. So the development will need to be in place, will it not?
Yeah, it would help, yes. Okay. You could go out right now and collect a traffic count data and show them the volumes, and if they warranted, then you would enter into a discussion with them about installing traffic signal control.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one more question, if I may. So the road improvements that you're speaking of, the Michigan left, this, that, and the other, is that going to be phase one or phase two?
I don't know when they'll be constructed.
I thought I saw another hand. Oh, okay. Okay, guess not. Mr. Lundy.
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer Ms. Mitchell's question.
Please.
Thank you. The Michigan lefts and those improvements are contingent upon the build-out of both phases, phase one, phase two, the entire 55-acre development. So that would be, to answer your question, phase two.
Any further questions from anyone on the, Mr. Lundy, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to add, I know we keep talking about the signalization efforts and requirements that are involved with things. I asked Larry Showalter to be here tonight from communications. He works closely with engineering. You know, he's constantly looking at how we can improve signalization and the performance of it. Just want to thank him for all that he's doing. But the technology, I don't know if you want to explain some of it, Larry, but you know, the way the technology is advancing, it's almost like the technology can keep the counts and let you know when you should be adjusting the signals, and then we can look at the data, or currently we look at the data, we can make the adjustments with the signalization, and I think Larry and his department's been doing a very good job on that. I think we got the traffic flowing, you know, pretty well. So I just wanted to, if there was anything you wanted to add to that, Larry certainly could at this time. Larry loves to make presentations, so.
With all the improvements, it does help us make a lot of timing changes, and it has drastically improved everything. But with what we got going on and adding extra, it's definitely going to be a challenge. We are currently moving a lot of cars out there right now. Our main problem out there right now is keeping eastbound Chestnut Ridge. When it flows through at Chestnut Commons. And then people coming from southbound left turn, it flows through at Chestnut Commons, because we don't want it to back up in a 57.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess that brings up another good question, our fire department. You gonna have an issue getting your fire trucks in there with all this congestion? Is that something we should even think about? Or have we thought about?
Well, first say we'll need a fire station out there, but, I had to, too easy. You know, it's difficult now, but the signals are all, we're able to control them with the siren. They can activate the green. So I will say, though, that traffic now is a concern for getting in there and getting through traffic. So I don't necessarily think it's going to increase anything, but no one's consulted me about anything like that. But usually in these developments, I'll tell you, in my experience, that's not a common thing. You know, as long as we can control the lights, which I believe where'd you go? Yeah, we'll be able to. I don't see it being a problem other than it's just going to be congestion. That's all right.
Mr. Stewart. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair.
If I can add just one small thing. We're southbound left turn at Chestnut and 57. Through all the traffic patterns, we're averaging about 250 cars an hour is what we're moving out there. And then westbound, we're averaging through all three patterns around 500 cars an hour that's going through Chestnut Commons and to go into that area. So it's quite a bit of volume and traffic that is moving out there.
Mr. Showalter, if you could stay there. So are you, Mr. Showalter?
Go ahead.
So just to confirm, you know, through Mr. Lundy, what his comments were, so is that something that we can control? As far as the signaling, if you wanted to keep the green light saying green until that dissipates, either way, whether that's going eastbound, westbound, southbound, northbound, to kind of alleviate some of that traffic in some of these certain areas?
It's all going to depend on the improvements that happen out there. What's going on right now, 3/4 of the timings are dedicated to that eastbound at Chestnut Commons, getting in there. Problem is in the evening time, what ends up happening is we're congested westbound at Chestnut Commons when we're just as busy eastbound. So when people want to make a left into Chestnut Commons, they can't because there's so much westbound traffic flow. But we can do the best we can, but it's, you know, people only have one place to shop, and we're trying to jam everybody down in one location.
Thank you. And one more comment, if I may, and I don't know if anyone else has to, but, you know, I appreciate the development company coming here and wanting to invest into the city. I mean, there's a lot of time and effort that's been put in here. I understand that. So, but I think this is a good conversation, good debate on the concerns that, you know, I wasn't here at the last full council meeting, but, you know, the concerns from our citizens in this ward and overall, and trying to address these problems and the future planning that's going to be going on here, with the hopes that this would take off and more dialogue and more communication with it. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to have that stated out there because I know there's been a lot of effort put into this. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one in closing.
Sure.
To address President Stewart's comments. A word about ABC Development, our company. We've gotten involved in this site in 2014 and we've proven over and over again that we're a good partner with the city. In 2016, at the city's request, when we had the property under contract before, or really at the same time that Panera was going in, the city of Elyria asked us to delay our development pending the Mannequin-Smith report. At the same time, they requested that we co-sponsor that report, which we did. So we delayed and we co-sponsored the Mannequin-Smith safety report. Then again, in 2018, at the city of Elyria's request, we annexed 36 acres into the city. So we have a demonstrated history of working with the city. We intend to continue to do that. We know there's traffic concerns out there. We heard the citizens from last week's, and we're going to continue to work with the city. And we may not solve it right away, but we're going to continue to work to make it better.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just one more time, I'll ask. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, we have a committee report. I'm prepared to read it for community development. And then we'll get a vote from finance. Mr. Oswald, looked like you had one more thing to say.
Yeah, I guess I just want to question, so if we vote on this, it still has to go to council
Yes,
for full approval?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yes. Mr. Stewart, are you prepared in your mind to put this to a vote for your committee?
Sure, we'll put it to vote for finance, and
Okay.
then people can vote as they see fit at this particular time tonight. And then, you know, if they need to gather more information, which they should,
Right.
you know, before the full council meeting going forward. So, you know, everyone's come up here tonight to have that good discussion, so I think we should owe it to everyone to kind of to see where everyone lies.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So keeping in mind, this is a matter, the matter of an economic development agreement with Eaton Point LLC. We have considered the matter of an economic development agreement with Eaton Point LLC. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into the said agreement. Could I get a motion from community development?
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Oswald and seconded by Mr. Lippian. Question on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
One nay.
Can I get a motion from finance?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Tolet. Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carried.
I want to thank everybody for their input and taking the time to answer all the questions and concerns council has, along with the administration and the effort put forward tonight. So this will be voted on in full council next Monday night at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Okay, next item on the agenda is the matter of the review and approval of recommendations of the Tax Incentive Review Council, which met on February 9th, 2023. Community Development Director Scott.
Through you, on February 9th, the Tax Incentive Review Council met to review all of the Community Reinvestment Area Agreements and the Enterprise Zone Area Agreements. So overall, there were 14 Enterprise Zone Agreements, 6 CRA agreements with companies, and a handful of residential. The recommendations of the Turk were attached to the referral. All of the companies were in compliance. 3 of them are set to expire and will not be reporting out next calendar year. It is the recommendation of the Turk and the Community Development Department to follow the Turk's recommendation on all agreements.
Well, thank you very much. Looks like we've been busy. A lot of agreements. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of the review and approval of the recommendations from the Tax Incentive Review Council. This is a resolution authorizing to adopt the recommendations of the Tax Incentive Review Council, which met on February 9th, 2023. Can I get a motion through Community Development? Motion made by Mr. Schneider.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Mitchell.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Can I get a motion from finance?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sarah. Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Boy, that one was easy. Okay. The next item is item 4, which is the matter of waiving the residency requirement of the Safety Service Director position. Mayor Whitfield.
Well, I guess I, wanted to bring, well, I'm not the mayor, obviously, but I wanted to bring this before council. As I've said in the past, really enjoying the new job and the opportunity to work here in the city of Elyria. I know that under the ORC and under the policy, I think there's 6 months that you have for residency. And just the purpose of this, I guess, is to let council know that I don't currently have residency. I guess I have 6 months to move in. I know in the past the council's made that for a longer period of time. Obviously, this is a crazy real estate market right now for selling and buying and all those things. But the bottom line is whatever determinations made by council, that's certainly what I'm prepared to do.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Tolet?
Mine is a comment. Currently, our safety service director, none of our assistants reside in Elyria, and God forbid, in the event something should happen to a mayor, per the law department, at this point, it would revert to the mayor's legal counsel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then I would vote no on this.
Okay. Mr. Oswald?
And this come up again when Mr. Firestein was in, and I guess I was at the point that time too that I liked him just like I like Matt. And I think I'm going to say no also, but I think that this keeps coming up. It seems like irregularly all the time. We need to change an ordinance, because if everybody feels like this ordinance doesn't mean anything, then change the ordinance. We keep coming in here, there's a rule on the books. So I'm going to also vote no, not because of the person, but because of the ordinance. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Assistant Law Director Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, this is not an ordinance. This is a state statute, actually 2 state statutes. One that defines the service director, one that defines the safety director. They are statutes that we have not deviated using our home rule authority, so we still default to them. And the actual wording of the statute is, well, not the actual wording, but what it says is that the safety service director shall reside within the city within 6 months of his appointment, unless that is waived by ordinance. So I would suggest that you have an alternative. You don't necessarily, if you have misgivings, definitely have a full discussion tonight. If you want to, talk about that. You don't necessarily have to take action on this tonight either. Another option is you can move this down a month or two and see how things are going and revisit. So I would just make that comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Bruning, you brought up a good point. If there's a channel that we can go through legally, I didn't know what it was, statute you're saying rather than an ordinance. If there's something else that we can do that makes it right, makes me more comfortable that we're just not pushing all these rules and regulations aside, But it seems like there was a reason why they did it. They want that person here in case something happens.
Well, and I think the history speaks for itself. Until the last couple of years, this hasn't happened in my memory, at least. There may be an instance of it, or more than one instance of it going back, during the decades, but it just hasn't come up. And people are, moving around. People are working from home. We're living in a different era. That's something that you might want to consider when you're looking at this comprehensively. But as it is right now, there has never been anything on the books in the city that we have been able to find that changes the requirements of the state statute. You can look at potentially altering that. I'd have to do some research onto whether or not we could do that. But for now, the mechanism is to waive the requirement on a case-by-case basis by ordinance. And you have 6 months from the date of the director's appointment in which to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Was there at any point an ordinance that stated that firemen and policemen had to, by ordinance, reside in the city of Elyria? Did we ever have an ordinance stating that, or has that always been up to their choice.
I would defer to the law director, but from my personal aspect of following city council since the early 1970s, I don't recall, but that's totally off the record.
I haven't been here that long. That requirement hasn't been here since 2011 when I've been involved. And I know there has been some state case law that changed those requirements for civil service personnel. But this is not a civil service position. This is at-will political appointee. Those rules are entirely different.
Yes, Mr. Lippian.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. So nobody seems to know, and I'd be interested to know because with all the safety issues that we've had, I've heard from more than one resident that if we had more police and fire living in our community, we'd have more safe residents residing in Elyria, and it would not only make people feel safer, but it would give them a buy-in to what's going on in the community instead of feeling detached from it and coming from far-flung areas of the county. Well, hold on, just let me finish. I'm just giving you what I've heard from ward residents. So it doesn't sound like anybody knows, and I recognize the distinction between political appointee and fire and police force, but as the safety service director, as if you will, the titular head of safety services and the example of safety in the city, I would just be interested to know if that was ever an ordinance, because it would be schismatic for us to expect the safety service director to not reside in the city, to reside in the city of Elyria, but allow others not to, that help ensure our safety. I'm just being frank about my thoughts on this, that's all.
Right, and I'm just responding to that by saying that we cannot, by law, require those personnel to live within the city. The state law specifically requires that the safety service director reside within the city, again, unless waived by ordinance. I mean, that is our mechanism. We like it, we don't like it, but that is what the General Assembly has set forth for us.
Mr. Lippian, go ahead.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. Sure, but be that as it may, nobody knows or can recall if there was ever an ordinance stating that. So I would just be interested to know. Oh, I see the fire chief raise his hand, who, by the way, is a proud resident of the city of Elyria. Fire chief.
Yeah.
All right, so just for the safety forces, years and years ago, we're talking 50 years, there was that. But through time, civil service employees, and it's been deemed unconstitutional. Cleveland went through this the last few years, that you can't mandate your employees to live in the city. So I can't speak on civil or safety service, but I will tell you that, sure, 50, 60 years ago that was there, but you're not gonna win that fight today, I don't think, with the unions and with the civil service employees.
Yes, Mr. Lippian. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I'm not taking that fight on. Thanks, Chief, for that comment. I just think it's good for the residents to hear that, because a lot of them have asked that question, and I think they deserve an answer. So I'm glad somebody here remembers when that was and why it changed. So, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, and just to follow up what Law Director or Assistant Law Director Bruning had said, that, you know, back when Mr. Firestein was here, we made that exception because at that time, Assistant Safety Service Director Brubaker was here and local, and we know that he was going to be overseeing that, and then those roles reversed, and then Director Firestein moved on to another position out of the administration. So I feel strongly about that, you know, we should have somebody here in the event that something happens to the mayor, that person should be here localized to lead this, the city until that's solidified. So I would not support this as well.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Whitfield.
Just for the record, I don't like y'all talking about something happening to me. Let's use another example. Let's use another example.
We don't want that to happen. We're just saying, it's got to be out there.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I got a little bit different viewpoint here, and I appreciate all viewpoints and respect every single council member and everyone's view, as I always do. However, in this case, for now, under the term that the current mayor is mayor, I feel I want to stay consistent with what we did in the beginning. That's my view on that. We did that earlier in the term for the first safety service director. And that's just my thoughts, and we'll go from there. Anybody wants to chime in? Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. To seek clarification on your point, when you say you want consistency, what do you mean by that? Do you mean consistency in terms of precedent or consistency in terms of the ordinance? I'm just trying to understand your viewpoint.
In terms of staying consistent through Mayor Whitfield's term. We did it one time, you know, and to stay consistent, and I would vote to do it again. Go right ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So to understand your viewpoint, you would vote aye today? Is that how I understand your viewpoint to be?
Correct, I would.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Tolet?
My only, through you, there's a difference, like Mr. Stewart pointed out, that this time we don't have a backup assistant safety service director who resides in Elyria. That's the difference. And I think that's a big difference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I respect that. Are there any other comments? Yeah, Mr. Lundy.
Yeah, just, you know, for clarification, I think that, you know, it's important for everyone to know that, you know, I've lived in this community for 15 years over my lifetime, and have always enjoyed living in Elyria. I have no hesitation whatsoever about moving into the city, so I don't want anybody to hear that. In fact, you know, when this opportunity presented itself, I thought, if I could go to work for any city, it'd be the city of Elyria. Enjoyed working here before. So I just want you to hear from me that I have no reservations whatsoever about moving in at within that 6-month window. That's not a problem. Just wanted to give council the opportunity to have this discussion and figure out what you folks wanted to do. And, I'm excited to be here, really enjoy everybody I work with, and proud to represent the city. And whatever determinations made by council, I'm certainly ready to do that. I'm not being forced into doing it. I'm more than willing to do it.
Well, thank you, Safety Service Director Lundy. Assistant Law Director Bruning had said earlier that we have 6 months to make a decision and vote on it. We could vote on it tonight if everybody wants to. We could put the pause button on it and maybe review it in 30 to 60 days. I'm just giving some options. I've got some heads shaking out there in the wrong direction. So, I thought maybe more could be added if Mr. Lundy was looking. I guess that doesn't seem to be okay. Go right ahead, Mr. Tolet.
To you, Mr. Chair, I would rather not kick the can down the road on this one. Let's go, in my opinion.
Okay, well, it's my job to reiterate what the Assistant Law Director had said, just to review. It appears we want to vote on it, so let's vote on it. Do we have another question? You can't hear me? All right, we're gonna go ahead and vote on this tonight. I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of waiving the residency requirements for the Safety Service Director, Matt Lundy. This is an ordinance authorizing to waive the residency requirement for Safety Service Director, Matt Lundy. Can I get a motion from Community Development?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Mitchell, seconded by Mr. Schneider.
Question?
Question on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
We have one no?
No.
Can I get a motion from Finance?
So moved.
By
Second.
Mr. Schneider, second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Call for question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
I'm sorry, just for clarification on the record, who voted no? Just two? Three? Three noes. Thank you. That's a minority report from Finance, majority report from Community Development.
What do you do?
It still goes to council. Okay, so it'll be on the agenda next week. We'll prepare an ordinance and we'll bring it to council for legislation. I was just clarifying for the minutes how the votes went. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And, good discussion, everybody. Yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll tell Mr. Lundy, we have a lot of new developments on the west side. Come on.
What's that?
We have a lot of new developments on the west side.
Absolutely,
Happy to show you and your lovely wife.
absolutely.
Mr. Lippian.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have some beautiful classic homes on the east side. I'd be glad to walk around and show them to you.
As I said before, it was a great discussion and great debate and a lot of good ideas. So that's what council's for, and this is democracy in action. So thank you to everybody. One more item on the agenda for the joint meeting, and it's the matter of creating a support fund for Ukraine and other refugees to pay expenses
All
required.
comments on the record. Point of order, please. Thank you. Proceed, Mr. Chair. Excuse me.
Can I make a comment on this, Mr. Callahan, before we start? So I understand this was pulled out of the pending items, and I just want to clarify what we're going to be talking about today, because the history on this one is that it started out as a referral to Joint Finance Community Development that was when we were going to do a new program, I think, out of ARPA funds. Sometime in April, that whole discussion was pulled, and it was reorganized as a permanent appropriations item that was discussed and eventually voted down at the June meeting. So I don't know that this necessarily should have been one of the pending items. I'm not opposed to discussing it tonight, but I just kind of want to know where this discussion is going to be headed. If we had done this the right way, it would have been to require a new referral with an explanation of what was going to happen. So I would ask Mr. Lippian to go ahead and just kind of clarify what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Assistant Law Director, and thank you for those interesting comments. First, before I speak on it, I want to turn the mic over to the co-sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Schneider, see if he has something he'd like to say. All right. Tacit compliance. I like it. All right, thank you. So a lot of conditions have changed since we first brought this before council, and I'm not opposed to your thoughts about changing the ordinance a little bit, especially the wording. I think a tabled item being brought back up is timely, especially given some of the conditions on the ground. So I'd like to speak a little bit about, how we got here, if I could, and what some of the conditions are that have changed. So first of all, granting your point, we should probably change the verbiage of this suggested ordinance to the matter of creating a support fund for Elyria businesses to backfill labor with refugees via housing, because this is not a refugee program as a handout for refugees. This is a refugee program as a bolstering for our local businesses. And it's important that we understand that distinction, because in opposing this, we have to make sure we're not attacking a straw man. A straw man argument is where you attack the thing that it isn't instead of focusing on what it is. This is not a handout for refugees. If this were, I would be opposed to it. What this is a bolstering for businesses. So this is about being progressive, and this is about being proactive. So, I speak with a lot of Ward 1 employers. I speak with them all the time. I know the mayor has as well. And the primary theme I hear is, where have all the workers gone? Where are they? How do we get them? And the answer we all have for them is, well, we don't know where they all went, but I can tell you where some more workers are. But I'd be interested in kind of explaining how we got to this point here. So when this whole invasion began, when Russia invaded the sovereign territory of Ukraine, I took the proactive step of coming to council and putting two things on the table. I put down a resolution as a verbal resolution to support the nation of Ukraine against the tyrannical aggression of Russia, and Putin's Russia in specific, and that passed unanimously. But I also foresaw that we would have a refugee influx, and I believe that was me being proactive to try and get ahead of the wave before it came. So where did that take us? Well, a lot of community leaders founded LC for Ukraine, which was an alignment of several leaders that wanted to get ahead of this problem. And I reached out to Global Cleveland, and I reached out to us together. And even though this council debated it and discussed it, one wonderful thing came from that. I got phone calls from that organization that was in touch with refugees on the ground that had been shut out after the Mexican border got closed. These families were separated from their loved ones. They were in Tijuana. The Mexican border completely closed. They couldn't go back, and they also didn't know what to do going forward. So then President Biden was able to get them humanitarian parole. And then what we got from our folks on the ground in Tijuana was, hey, we've got all these refugees. They need a place to stay. We will not help them get up to Cleveland unless we can guarantee they have at least 1 year's residency. So free of charge so that they can get their bearings. And I made a couple phone calls to some local leaders, and they were able to contribute money to LC for Ukraine. LC for Ukraine was on board. We snapped into focus, and we made it happen. And we were able to, with the generosity of private individuals who not only gave up apartment spaces and dance spaces. Pardon me, a phone went off. But they gave up rental spaces, they gave up apartment spaces for this, and they also gave money to help transfer them. So when they arrived, they started arriving in many, there were a lot of them. And the problem became, how do we help get them from point A to B and from B to C? And what I'm very thankful for is that the Lorain County Commissioners unanimously approved the support for Neighborhood Alliance to hire a Ukrainian-speaking caseworker for these refugees, which was great. And her name is Katya Kornienko, and she's here to speak from Neighborhood Alliance, which will be great to hear her. And what has changed about this is, and you'll hear about this, they were given a year, and now they can find employment, but they need a hand up, not a handout. They need a hand up into the housing market. We want these people, Elyria being the highest concentration of Ukrainian refugees in the county, not only do we want to help them, but we want to help our businesses get employers, and that's really where we're going here. So, you know, this is taxpayer relief to employers via refugees benefiting from the results. What this would produce would be tax revenues for our cities, population stability, because the population of Elyria, we know, has declined in the last census, which is concerning, and it would help with our labor shortage. Unemployment numbers are the best that we've seen in a long time. So they wouldn't necessarily be, flying in the face of that. So relief to employers who've suffered a loss of employees due to COVID. And we discussed extensively whether ARPA funds could be used for that. Through several conversations with our people in Columbus, we found out, yes, they can, because it is relief to the employer for loss of labor due to COVID. So very clear we explain that. This is not a handout. This is for our employers to get labor. So this is not philanthropy. It is proactivity. It's not a handout, but a hand up. And it's not a payment to the refugees, but it's an investment in our economy through added labor. We are community development, at least the board that I sit on is community development. And this is developing our community and our economy through added labor. There are plenty of jobs. Taxpayers would get their money back through payroll tax revenue and other things. It's progressive, not regressive. And then for those of us, we need to remember too, using some empathy, we were once refugees. We were once immigrants to this country. We once benefited from programs that were established to help hand us up into the labor force and into productive citizens so that we can sit on councils like this and interact with residents like we have out there in the community. And do we escalate up the ladder and then pull it up behind us? This isn't just for Ukrainian refugees, which I think is very important to distinguish here. This is for all refugees. If Vladimir Putin invades Moldova, as we're now seriously discussing him doing, there would be Moldovan refugees. This program would help Moldovan refugees get plugged into employers as well. So it's proactive. At one point, it all comes down to the golden rule and empathy. How would you want to be treated if you were in their situation? And with that, we have some representatives from the Neighborhood Alliance who I'm sure would love to talk about their experiences with the refugees up to this point.
Thank you. State your name and address for the record.
Hello, and thank you, Andrew, for inviting us. I'm with Neighborhood Alliance. My name is Katya Kornienko, and I'm the case manager for LC for Ukraine. My address is 3050 Garfield Boulevard, Lorain, Ohio, 44052.
Rebecca Haywood, Neighborhood Alliance, 265 Washington Avenue, Elyria.
Okay. Well, I'm here today to say thank you, first and foremost, for being the case manager to represent our Ukrainian refugees. I'm a daughter of a Ukrainian refugee parents. I'm American born here. My parents are from Ukraine. Unfortunately, they've passed on, but they have taught me the culture, the language, and the compassion toward being a refugee person. Right now, we've got 15 families I'm working with. Primarily, they're in Elyria, and we're coming up on a year that the war has unfortunately lasted, and we've got issues concerning housing. And we need funds. We need to help these people. They are doing extremely well, taking classes, learning the English language, trying to get their work permits, working, getting their social security. They are anxious to get their life going and acclimate to the United States culture. Been a little hard. I'm very thankful that I'm able to speak with them and help them understand the culture. It's very much culture shock, food culture shock, and as far as just learning how to live here. The children are getting a little acclimated better and better. We're trying to find programs for them to learn a lot more, but it takes time. And like I said, it's been a year, and I just really hope that we can help them continue to stay here. They have nowhere to go. Right now, they can't go back to Ukraine. There's nothing there for them. So I just wanted to say thank you for having us. And that's a little bit about what I do. I coordinate everything I can for them. And I thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for coming this evening. So, do you only work with Ukrainian refugees, or are there other populations that you work with as well?
We work with several other populations, so
Such as?
we have homeless center, the homeless shelter in Lorraine. We have child care centers. We work with people who are homeless and mentally ill, which is our PATH team that does outreach. We have a couple of rental programs that are funded through us, not for Ukrainians. The paperwork that I think you guys may have gotten is sort of a mesh of those two programs. So our PATH outreach team houses individuals who are mentally ill. So that's one program. And then the other program is UCAN, which is through United Way. And we work on keeping people housed, keeping them from getting evicted as long as they are working, to help them through a crisis so they can get back on their feet. And that's really anyone who's employed. And then we also, as a part of that UCAN funding, we also help those who are on Social Security, who are not working, and that tends to be the older population, 60 and up. And we help those individuals in Lorain County as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. So you help other populations of refugees find jobs as well?
Not necessarily refugees.
Immigrants?
I mean, we can. The Ukrainian population that came to us from ELSI through Ukraine, because we started with the housing committee. So I mean, we can. We haven't really done it before. The Ukrainian population was the first time that we sort of dipped our toe in that pool of helping refugees.
Any other questions? Mr. Tolet.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask if Colleen could put up on the screen for the public, and this is not for our guests here. Thank you for what you've done. I would ask council to put on their monitors.
Thank you.
I'd like to go into council with my research done before I go in, and in researching Ukrainian refugee funding, the federal government started a program that's operated through Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. It provides cash assistance for housing. It provides job training. It provides full medical care at no cost to the refugees. A full SNAP program for a period of up to 36 months for all their food, to cover all their food cost. There's also provides work programs and work transition programs, again, through, it's a federal program, it's run through Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. There's no area of this, of their resettlement that is not covered. Medical, healthcare, food, housing, and job training. There's also programs through, and it's shown here, through Catholic Charities Migration Services, again for resettlement. To me, it's do we take additional Elyria taxpayer resident money to put into this, or are we just duplicating services? It's my personal feeling that Elyria residents have spent enough already because they've paid for this program once. I don't think we should pay for it twice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lippi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilman Tolet. For the reading public, could you please point out where on this list housing assistance is shown?
Ali, could you go to the main?
I don't see housing. I don't see for housing. I see cash assistance, but I don't see housing. If you could please illuminate that or point it out on the screen. Where is it? All questions go through the chair.
Okay, I guess Mr. Tolet, are you asking?
Okay. Here's the main fact sheet page.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lippian.
Through you, thank you. I'm not seeing housing here, and in the interest of time, we might want to proceed to a more productive conversation until perhaps at a later time we can find out where this housing assistance is that Mr. Tolet fancies it might be.
It's in the cash payments.
At any rate,
the one before that, it's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Thank you. As I said, since Councilman Tolet has not been able to produce that, perhaps at a future meeting he could, and we can debate that then. I'd love to do that. That would be great. But in the meantime, for the sake of discussion, since this is only up for discussion today and it is not up for a vote, I'd be interested to see what other council people think, given that housing doesn't appear to be on here right now, whether we want to give this assistance to employers, what the appetite is for that, and also the sense of timing, given the urgency of the housing deadline that our Illyrian refugees, they are Illyrians, are facing.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Davis.
Through you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the ladies, do they partner with other organizations like for Urban League, or who else do they partner with this refugee?
So we partner with several other agencies to answer that question when helping through all of our programs. We're part of quite a few collaboratives here in Lorain County, depending on what services we need and what services other agencies need from us. So yeah, we are definitely in that network of nonprofit agencies in Lorain County.
Through you, Chair, because I know that the Urban League will help, like housing and so forth. And so if there's already in the housing, and their contract is almost up, partnering with somebody like them, like the Urban League, maybe you can be able to extend their contract, in the housing, have the funds to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Whitfield.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question as well. So the program that was up here, is a part of the work that you do help people apply for this assistance?
Absolutely. That's the first thing I did when I work with the families. We make sure that they get the medical and the food stamps. The cash assistance is a program in which they have to work at least 30 to 40 hours to receive a very minimum amount of cash, which would not be able to be afforded to pay for housing, in my opinion.
Chairman, so I just wanted to add my sentiment to the conversation. If, I think this is, first of all, I appreciate the work that you're doing out there. I'll start there. This is a very important issue. I think our support as a country for Ukraine is important. If it wasn't for democracy, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So it's important for us to make a stance. One of the things I asked Director Lundy to talk about was kind of this justification of what, the county initiated this sort of work through the LC for Ukraine. And I think, a part of what I want to make sure that it's reflected in the city of Elyria is that we welcome, refugees, and we want to support those families. I'm actually having a lunch with some of the families in the coming week. So I think it's just important that we find a way, and I think this solution wasn't presented before. We were kind of trying to figure out something, as you could hear from the discussion, but I think you being a navigator of those resources is a great partner for us to work with and support, because then you're going to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. If we give you resources and you got money for something already, it's not going to be double dipping. You're going to make sure you pull on things. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I am not against support for Ukraine. I think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing because they need it. My stance is what we do for one, we do for all. There are other immigrants in this city, and I think I spoke on this before. There was an influx of refugees, immigrants from Puerto Rico when Hurricane Maria hit, and if we're not helping them, we should be, exactly. But I don't hear anything about them. So, and that's my whole point. What we do for one, we should be doing for all. And if we can't do that, then we don't do for none. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, my response to Councilwoman Mitchell would be I totally agree. And I think it takes folks like you to advocate for those folks from Hurricane Maria to say, hey, there's a group in my neighborhood. I think when I went around, and when I was campaigning back in 19, I was shocked at how many families were here in the city, and we were not ready. We did not have bilingual literature. We didn't have bilingual, so they were struggling to live here in Elyria because our city wasn't ready for it. So, I think it's not like this sort of, the same way we might support breast cancer or support prostate cancer. It's not like, well, if you don't support all cancers, then you can't support this. I think, we need to target what resources are needed. And I think when it comes to the folks who have migrated from Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria, we need, more bilingual literature. Like there's a support system we need to create. And I'd love to have that discussion. But I think with us having this navigator here for the Ukraine refugees, I think it's a low cost, easy entry for us to support. But I don't think it should stop there.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lippian.
Through you, Mr. Chair Callahan, thank you. I echo those sentiments. We would love to, this is for all refugees. This is for all refugees. And I know that there's El Centro out there that is de servicios de sociales. Hablo español, tengo 4 años en mi escuela de medio, and I speak Spanish very well, and I would love to welcome them as well. So I don't think we should stop with just Ukrainians. That's why I said Moldovans, refugees that are fleeing natural disasters as well. We have to be a welcoming city, and I think this is a bridge to that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to add one last thing. A lot of these refugees began coming to Elyria, to Lorain County in May of last year. Some of the people who have been helping with their housing have said that they would help them for about a year. So we're starting to come upon that 1-year mark, which is why this is important for us, because now we have to start looking for other places, maybe for some of these families to go, and some of them aren't working yet, or they're just now starting to get their visas where they can start. being employed. So that's why this funding is important for us as well right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lippian.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for bringing that point up, because there is a sense of urgency to this. Before it was proactive, when the refugees come, if the refugees come. The refugees are here, most of them are in Elyria, and they're facing a time crunch, and I think we owe it to them to try and find a way to help them navigate it. And the beautiful part about this is it's relief to our employers, our Elyria employers that are starving for labor. And so I think we need to make sure, I see some people shaking their heads and rolling their eyes, but maybe they don't quite understand it. To attack this as a refugee handout is a straw man. I see somebody waving a Ukrainian flag, that's beautiful. I have a Ukrainian American flag, but we need to remember this isn't just Ukrainian refugees. As noted by Councilman Mitchell, Mayor Whitfield, and others, this is for all refugees. I think we should be a welcoming city, and I plan to bring something before this body for a vote by the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other hands? Mr. Lundy?
If I could just add, I know this is a council discussion, but, in my previous capacity, I was one of the co-chairs of the Lorain County for Ukraine when we launched it. We tried to build off the model of when members of the Puerto Rican community came here after Hurricane Maria. The situation that is so different is that those who came here from Puerto Rico were coming from a U.S. territory. The individuals coming to our country from the Ukraine are in fact refugees. The biggest issue that we ran into was the federal government actually, you can understand the complexities of immigration law once you drill down on an issue like this. You have able-bodied people who, they have a lot of pride. They want to go to work. They want to go to work. They don't want cash assistance and handouts, and they just want to be able to go to work. And for the longest time, they weren't able to go to work because we had to wait out a period of time for them to be able to get Social Security numbers. We had people who wanted to put them to work. The other issue is always breaking through the language barrier. The challenge that we ran into with Hurricane Maria, and then also in the case of these refugees, was they didn't exactly have time to pack up their resume that they had in their file cabinet to bring with them, right? They just had to get out. And in the case of Puerto Rico, obviously they lost whatever they had and showed it with just the clothing on their back. And for a lot of these refugees, that was the case, or maybe a suitcase of some personal items. So you have to work through with, workforce development. We work closely with them so we could do translations and put together a resume that would work. We had to have people sit there with them to get into the Ohio Means Jobs system so we could start to develop a pattern of what their job skills were and how we could possibly match them up with certain jobs once those jobs came available. We ran into a situation with, we placed a couple people in the truck driving jobs that came here from Puerto Rico at the time, and we had some issues sometimes with language barriers. And unfortunately, some of those didn't work out. So, we had to work through the transition of the resumes, the language barrier, and, we brought families in based upon housing that was available. The outpouring in the community, I know Mr. Flanagan, a well-respected businessman in the community, he provided some housing. And these folks, we had to coordinate going to the airport, having somebody who spoke the language when they met them, transporting them to the house, already having food in the refrigerator, and then when they would want to go out into the community or go to El Centro or go to Jobs Family Services, whichever agency they're reaching out to, or we had to have translators there. And I will tell you, Councilman Lippian was amazing in providing, those translators to help out. We had to make sure that there were multiple translations. There's multiple languages in that country. These are just examples of how complex these issues are, but these individuals, when they arrive here, they are going through very sad mental health issues. They've been traumatized. And I think any help that any community can give to these families is much needed, no question about it. So I'll leave the discussion up to council, but anytime any of you want to have a side conversation with me about what we saw firsthand, you know, it's difficult when a lot of our forefathers came here before us too. They had a rough way getting in, but these are folks who've lost their homeland and they're trying to start a new life, even if it's maybe a temporary one with hopes of returning someday. But unfortunately, you know, we've reached that 1 year point now, and it's like anything. I don't know about you folks, you know, I like to have family come in and visit from out of state every once in a while, but probably after about 3 days, I'm like, when are they leaving, you know? And I think even for some families who provided support for these families, that it reaches a point where, hey, I want to go on with my life, and, you know, hopefully you can get on with yours. But that challenging part is being able to get the work and being able to pay the bills. I heard some guys talking at the gym saying, boy, I'd love to have these Ukrainian families working in my plant or my factory. They're hard workers. They got a good work ethic. So the opportunities are there, but any assistance we can provide to these families who are just so greatly traumatized certainly helps a lot. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lundy. Mr. Lippian.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to also add that, as I've discussed with you before, something I've learned on council is that, like preparing a meal, every ordinance has a different prep time. Some of these ordinances are microwave dinners. We're good. As you guys have seen with some of our previous items, some of these are more crock pot meals. They're taking time. The flavors have to combine. I think we've come to the point where the flavors have combined. We've got a Ukrainian-speaking caseworker. We've got Neighborhood Alliance. We've got the people that have the skills and the abilities. LC for Ukraine has proved robust. And I think, like I said, I'm looking forward to bringing something to council for a vote, so our ayes may be ayes and our nays may be nays.
Thank you. Okay. Good discussion, everybody. Like I said, democracy in action. Everybody has their point of view, and it was good. It was a good, healthy discussion. So thank you. Seeing no business for community development, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Lippian.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Mitchell.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.
Finance wants to take a 5-minute recess. It's been a long meeting up until now. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
If you were to guess, how long do you think this meeting is going to take?
I don't foresee it.
I have a FaceTime scheduled with someone. It's not on the agenda. It's not on the agenda. Is it?
Well, we are going to be talking
That much? Taking a nap. Thank you. This was an email, right? Yeah, I got this email.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nothing in here. No, I think I'm gonna go. It's pretty much.
Okay, it's the budget, yeah. Do you want this though? I printed out some of it.
Oh, yeah, I'll.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'm glad you saw that. No, he's just done now. Yeah, okay. I'll catch him when he comes back. Yeah. Jack, how you doing? You're Jack, this is when we talk about the budget.
Yeah. What do you do with that folder? How many people even want that folder? I gotta talk to you about it. I'm supposed to bring it in.
Oh. That's the joint one.
Yep. There's one in here that was signed on the wrong side.
Oh.
I didn't even know I was on
Oh,
it.
white out.
I didn't even know I was on it. The agenda came, I didn't even know we put it back on there.
Thank you.
Take off, leave me here, don't worry about
Hey,
At least you're granting for the choice. Mine
Telco.
Deer or some other animal or. That brought out a good one. See ya. That brought big chuckles when he kissed me, you know? Matt. Hey. Yeah. Make sure. I bet you are. See ya.
Okay, we're going to continue on with finance. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the finance meeting minutes for February 13th, 2023. Could I get a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Sarah, second by Mr. Centers. Any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item number 2. We've considered the matter of the consideration of combining building permits for the Rosewood Park apartment complex to be issued per building instead of per unit. An ordinance authorized the building permits to be issued to the apartment complex building instead of each permit unit of said apartment complex. Can I get a motion to get it on the floor?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schneider, second by Mr. Sarah. Mr. Farkas? Can I hear, is Miss?
You're okay, John. Thank you, Chair, through you. As a backstory to this initial request, this took place late last year when the storm hit, and it was severely cold. Many places lost heat and power. We received several complaints from the tenants of the Rosewood apartment complex. They were stating they had no heat, they had lack of water. As our team went out to investigate, we discovered the use of many portable electrical heaters, which of course is a hazard. As the inspection team was there, they discovered that there was multiple electrical contractors on site, rewiring many of the units. Of course, there were no approvals, nor was anything in the system as far as any review. We made contact with the ownership, indicated that permits are required. They indicated why. I indicated per the Ohio Building Code, any kind of repair to an electrical system, especially one that is deemed a hazard, must be made per code and review. As each of these buildings consists anywhere between 6 to 8 units, each individual unit has an electrical panel. Each panel has to be independently inspected for compliance, i.e. each one has to have an approval. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions with that with reference to Mr. Farkas's explanation? Any other discussion, question? Mr. Schneider?
I have a question. So we're charging per building instead of per unit, correct? I just want to make sure I have that right, or that's what's being requested of us.
Through you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Snyder, the request is per unit. If the strip contains 8 units, they want to have just one basic fee to cover all of them instead of individually.
Thank you.
Mr. Bruni, did you have a question or just a comment or?
Well, I guess I just want clarification. So they're requesting, obviously, to relieve some of their fees that would be associated with these permits. But these are set, if I'm not mistaken, by the Ohio Building Code that we have adopted by ordinance. Is that correct, Mr. Farkas, for the permits?
Mr. Chair, through to you to Mr. Bruni, yes.
Okay. So we would be further varying from the standardized code that's in place statewide by changing the way the permit fees are charged.
Yes, sir. Not only that, it would also complicate in regards to tracking. If one permit was issued, for instance, for the building, we would have no idea if something failed in, let's say, Unit C. We would have no idea how to track that, who inspected it, or and to make repairs.
And just to follow up, the fees, I assume, are meant to defray some of the costs for the inspections, but you would still be inspecting the same number of units in the panels because they're all separately metered. Is that what you were telling us?
That is true. The costs are to offset the inspector's time per unit. A lot of these units are occupied, and we have to adjust accordingly. And as you indicated, the code does require that we issue approvals per project.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Minority report.
Mr.
Can I get a point of order clarification? By voting aye or nay, if we voted aye, we would support
the reduction in fees.
Okay, so by voting nay,
you have declined the request.
Okay.
Okay.
I misunderstood.
Did we recall that?
I just wanted to clarify.
Well, let me read the committee report again before.
I just want to make sure, because I took it the other way.
So the way the committee report was read is an ordinance authorizing the building permits to be issued to apartment complex building instead of each apartment unit. So what the aye vote would have done was to authorize a permit for each building instead of, say, 8 permits in one building. If you voted aye, Mrs. Davis voted to consolidate to one permit for those 8 units. The rest of you who voted nay voted to keep them 8 separate permits for those buildings, and I'm using 8 obviously as a placeholder. Is that?
I misunderstood, yeah. So I misunderstood.
Through you, Chair, can I say something?
Ms. Davis?
Well, I think it should read, I missed that 8 units, so.
Well, 8 was a placeholder. It could be whatever number, 4 units, 6 units, it doesn't matter. But right now, every individual unit needs a permit, which means it needs a fee associated with that permit. What you're voting on is whether to not require each one to have its separate permit. I'm not making it clear, am I?
Well, we're voting on that each apartment has a permit.
No, that's the way it is now. You are voting to vary that, or you are voting to change that.
Okay.
That's being referred by Rosewood Park Management Company.
They are asking for relief from that requirement.
Right. What they're asking for.
So a yes vote would be to give them relief and only say, for every building you have, you only need one permit.
And we would go outside of the Ohio Revised Code if we voted yes.
You would be varying from the Ohio Building Code the way it's written.
Right.
I rescind
So
my vote.
I rescind my vote as well.
I rescind my
I'm
vote.
going to take another vote. How would we?
They need a motion for reconsideration from someone who voted.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so the reconsideration, on the reconsideration.
On the reconsideration, all those in favor signify by saying aye. B.
So basically, it's not
You're
being
saying-
reconsidered, it's standing.
Right, it's standing.
Okay, so there's still a minority report, I guess.
So
You changed
it's
your
basically
vote.
everyone's changing
You
their
changed
vote.
your vote, so you said no on the second time. All right, so there is no minority report.
It died.
There is no council ordinance that will take place from this, so this has died as a matter of failure to advance the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Burning and Mr. Farkas. And number 3, to consider the matter of finding the Elyria Police Department has a 2012 Chevy Tahoe Police Cruiser and a 2011 Ford Crown Victoria that are unfit for municipal use. A resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to declare said vehicles unfit for municipal use. Can I get a motion to get it on the floor?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Schneider. Chief Pelko.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. So we have a 2012 Chevy Tahoe, IBM 1496. Vehicle has over 116,000 miles, and taking it to CMG, it's no longer cost-effective to repair. Along with this, we also have a 2011 Ford Crown Vic, IBM 0314, has over 134,000 miles, and again, CMG is advised it's too cost-effective to repair. I would like to dispose of these through auction, govdeals.com, or any other best legal means with your approval.
Okay. Any questions for the chief? Further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. This is the follow-up to that. We've considered the matter of disposing 2 police vehicles that are unfit for multiple municipal use. An ordinance authorizing to dispose of said vehicles by auctioning on, govdeals.com, or for the best means possible. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sarah.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion based on what the chief's comments were?
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. I gotta. Okay. Item number 4. We consider the matter of a Cintas uniform and floor mat contract in ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a 3-year contract with the option to renew for 2 additional years with Cintas for uniforms and floor mats. Can I get a motion to get it on the floor?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schneider. Second by Mr. Sarah. Safety Service Director Lundy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and President. Cintas has been our vendor for the uniforms and the mats. We've had good response from our employees and departments about how that relationship has been working out. This contract is coming before you for a renewal. It's important to point out that Cintas is part of the state purchase list. So while the city is not required to go out to bid on it because of that condition, the city still needs council approval to enter into a contract with Cintas. The reason being, in the last 5 years, the city has paid between $55,000 and $59,000 a year. Therefore, the contract has been in excess of $50,000. So therefore, council approval would still be needed. Yes, we're looking for a 3-year agreement with 2 1-year renewal options.
Law Director Birding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm confused because of the way the agenda item is written and the way the committee report just read. Director, can you clarify, are we going out for bid on this? Because that's what the committee report that was read indicated. But you said it's on the state purchasing list, so we don't have to go out for bid.
Yeah, when I spoke with Sophie, he was indicating through our research, we determined Cintas actually is part of the state purchase list. So therefore, a bid is not required.
But this is not a renewal of an existing contract. We have an expired contract, so we need a new contract, and you're looking for 3 years with 2 additional 1-year renewals.
That's correct.
Got to change the committee report, but I'm okay with this. We can't have it as it's written. Would need a motion to amend with, just replace it with that language, I would say.
This is a motion to amend. We consider the matter of Cintas uniform and floor mat contract and ordinance authorizing state purchasing.
Just entering into a 3-year contract.
Just entering into a 3-year contract with the option to renew 2 additional years with the Cintas for uniforms and floor mats. Per state purchase.
So I'd need a motion to amend, a second on that, a vote on the amendment, and then you would vote on the actual content.
Can I get a motion on the amendment?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Tolet.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sear. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And then moving forward with the actual contract, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sear.
Second.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any further discussion?
Question?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. No, it's good. Temporary appropriation to be brought before us here?
Correct.
Okay. I think just for tonight, we're just going to have discussion, Mayor. This is in regards to item the 2023 permanent appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping that we would be going for a vote tonight, but I do see, I would say discussion with possible action, just from a time standpoint, so as we did before, so folks could get started on the work that they were doing. On the budget that we proposed here, that we've worked with finance on, it's a pretty, as I mentioned before, a pretty conservative budget. It still has some carryover funds that we made sure we preserved. It also has the only bit of ARPA requests we have are really carryover projects from before, and then a few that you'll see listed here today, as well as additional investments in police and fire. And that doesn't include some of the grants that we hope to secure this year as well. Our philosophy with this budget was, especially when it comes to ARPA funds, is to re-engage the community. A lot has changed since our initial proposal of the ARPA funds back when we first received them. There was a number of projects on the table that things have changed. So our philosophy is hold off on the ARPA funds. We have a stack of major projects, but as you know, if this levy doesn't pass, all of these ARPA funds may be helping us keep the city running. So we've withheld off on the ARPA with the recommendation of re-engaging the community to see what those needs are. If the levy passes, then really go after some of those major projects and some of the things that we've heard from the community.
Mary, and the last meeting in February, I guess that would be if you're looking at on the screen here and over and through the far right column, was the last meeting we had in regards to going over the budget. And and then on the outside, there were some changes over there. Can you go over those changes of what, I know even though they're small in nature, but just so that there's an understanding of what those changes are?
Yeah, I can go through some of these. So the first one, the first change that's happened was for cemeteries and an additional salary in cemeteries. I can let the Safety Service Director speak specifically to the need for capacity out there. We actually had to suspend some days of doing funerals because of the lack of capacity out there. And the maintenance manager out there has made it very clear he needs help, but he needs skilled help. He just doesn't need hands that can't fulfill the job of digging graves and actually doing the skilled labor. So that's that. From the human resources standpoint, they've asked for an increase to invest in their diversity, equity, inclusion work, and the human resources director is here to answer questions about that. The next one I would defer to the finance director on the rest of these requests, but those are the two that I can speak intelligently on.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So number 2 is basically in case I have to transfer money from one muni court fund to a couple others that were running close to being over appropriated. So that's adding $126,363 to muni court security transfers out in case I have to do that. Number 3 is a request from the muni court for revenue replacement, ARPA money revenue replacement in the amount of $205,438. Number 4 is in the 2016.50% income tax fund in the Economic Development Department, reducing operating and maintenance by $16,408 as the open purchase orders at the end of the year were accounted for twice in the budget preparation. And also in the 0.5% income tax fund in the Capital Needs Department, adding $100,000 for replacement light poles on State Route 57. As you know, when they fall, they have to be replaced. They break off and have to be replaced. And then an upfit for street department truck that was ordered, and the upfit would be a plow package, salt box, what have you. In the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, we're holding on to some money that has to be segregated into a separate fund as a federal audit requirement. So adding $78,118 to transfers out under Law Enforcement Trust, and I will come to you in the next meeting with a request to create that fund, that special fund. In the Sanitation Fund, adding $334,160 for reimbursements to the Water and General Fund as we do every year per ordinance, and reducing capital outlay in the Sanitation Fund by $400,000. That was requested for a new side loader truck, and the money just isn't there in the Sanitation Fund to pay cash for a truck, and I'm trying to pay off a $350,000 note that we issued a couple years ago to buy another garbage truck. So we still owe $350,000 on that outstanding obligation. So, and just to remind you, last year we bought 3 garbage trucks, two out of issue 6, 2016.50% income tax fund, and 1 out of ARPA. So we subsidized the Sanitation Fund's capital needs last year with special revenue funds by close to $1 million. So in the wastewater pollution control capital fund, that's the fund that I'm accounting for bond proceeds that we issued a while back, and we need to spend those completely down. So some of the projects that will be going on in the wastewater fund for sewer projects will take from the capital fund to spend that money. And one change that is not on this sheet but came in today at 4:30 was in Judge Bennett's office, adding $72,229 to salaries and wages, and in Judge White's office, adding $44,151 to salary and benefits, and that's to move existing personnel from a couple of their special muni court funds back into the general fund. So those are the changes that we had from the last meeting, from the document that we passed out the last meeting.
And I know there's been talks, and then the mayor mentioned that, you know, he's trying to hold off on the capital improvements. I think that's kind of, you know, we understand that from that retrospect, but I know there's issues that we need to look at as far as the fire truck. I mean, Chief Pernesti's been here, and with reference to the lead time, and this is 3 years to get this fire truck. So there's a lot of things that we need to kind of consider, and I just want to make sure that, you know, in reviewing this budget, I know that we're trying to get this thing passed, and we have it to the end of the March, but I'd rather just kind of hold off one more time for another meeting in regards to this, to see if there's any decisions that we want to move forward with some of the ARPA, even though the mayor is recommending holding off, but maybe there's some considerations that we want to take into account. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Tolet.
I have, I'm going to ask that Chief Pernesti come up for just 1 minute to answer a couple questions. Chief, let me back up. COVID has changed things. It's my understanding that we would be pushing 3 years out right now if we ordered a new ladder truck. Is that accurate?
That's what the company that I want to look at getting the same type of truck that we have now, same type of aerial, and that company has told me that you're looking at about 32 months. So they tell me 32, I'm assuming it's 36, so yes. And it's like that with all the manufacturers of fire apparatus.
And the current estimate is around 1.7 million for that ladder truck. Is that accurate? Is that in that vicinity?
Yeah, it's going to be in the neighborhood. That was the last email that the gentleman, the salesman that I asked for some pricing, gave me a rough estimate to get what we have now is about 1.7.
And again, and I brought it up, Mr. Stewart, because of illness, missed the last council meeting, that we had to call in for, oh my gosh, Susan Else. We needed a ladder truck. Ours was in for repair. Its age is about 14 years right now. Is that accurate, Chief?
It's a 2009, so 14 years.
14 years. So by the time our new would come in, we would be in the backup status already with our existing truck. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's standards. I mentioned many times before that there's National Fire Protection Agency standards on apparatus. And one of the things with the aerial is you get about 15 years. After that, you want to put it into reserve for another 5. And so we are there. We do need a reserve aerial. The problem is that by the time, if we hold off, by the time we get the new one, the one we currently have won't even be worth putting into reserve. And that's the problem. And the city does need a reserve aerial. There's no doubt about it. And so, you know, the longer we wait, the more the prices are going to go up. I don't have exact numbers, but you know, the costs are going to inflate if we continue to wait. So I'm trying to do the right thing and try to get it now while the money is
The other question I have, and I hate to come back to this subject, is radios. We had an agreement in place with the commissioners. They rescinded that agreement. They're not going back, as far as I understand. And also now Life Care will be changing to the new radios. Is that accurate? And could you speak to that?
Well, I mentioned here that last month, or a few weeks ago, I should say, just about a few weeks ago, the owner of Cleveland Communications, Mr. Close, stated that out of his own pocket, he was going to do some infrastructure improvements to enhance the reception for the Harris radio system. That being said, what's going to happen is departments that have the technology with the radios currently will be able to instantly go on this system. Life Care received a grant with Vermilion Fire last year. They've received the radios, and this infrastructure improvement, they've indicated to me they're jumping on it. So the problem is everybody has to understand that it's not so much just going to the system. It's being able to communicate with the departments that are on that system. And that's what keeps me up at night. That's what I keep reiterating here. So, yeah, it's another problem that we're going to have to face financially, because I just don't see the county agreement, or I don't see it coming to fruition, but that's the pessimist in me.
And we're looking at roughly $300,000 for a complete radio replacement. Is that accurate, Chief? In that neighborhood again?
Yeah, it's probably $350, and it depends on how much we want to replace immediately, which unfortunately we're going to have a clean sweep and do it all. So yeah, we're going to have that. It's going to be a problem. We're going to have to, like I mentioned at past council meetings, I'll be coming back to council. I'm being forced. The gun is to our heads to purchase these radios, and it's not by anybody with the city nameplate or city badge. It's all the departments outside of me that I can't communicate with. So that's the tough part. That's the frustrating part to me.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your guidance.
Chief, just before you leave, in regards to the radios, are the value of the radios that we currently have, is there any value of those if we were to move forward with? I mean, I don't know. It's a question, you don't have to answer tonight.
I would say that the radios that we have now, the police department utilizes. So there would be the value that the police department would be able to utilize those. I will say, though, that sooner or later, they're going to probably be in the same position someday soon, saying that the particular types of radios we have cannot communicate with multi-jurisdictional agencies in the county. And so I would say they're worth right now, there would be some worth to them, but at the end of the day, a year from now, 2 years from now, I would believe that the entire city is going to need that radio system that can do all the bands.
Through you, Chair.
Ms. Davis.
Yeah, through you to the chief. So is it safe to say that the ladder truck that we have that we need to replace, you can't even trade it in? Or
well, I don't want to trade it in, see, because there's value in it to hold its reserve status.
Okay.
The city is best
Back up.
when I have a reserve aerial. And so that means that, and it's more than just the ladder you see on that truck.
Mm-hmm.
That truck carries ground ladders that cannot fit on any of my apparatus, that when that truck is out of service, I don't have ground ladders that will reach a lot of the attics of the houses in the Heights, those big or in the south end, those big old colonials. I don't have the ladder complement if I don't have that ladder truck there.
So it's scary. So I personally don't want to trade it in, but I'll do what I'm told to do, but there's value in it as a reserve apparatus, if we don't wait too long.
Mr. Lippian, who's not on this committee, but go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I'm not. Thank you for listening to my comment. I just wanted to add, Fire Chief, that's a concern. I'm one of those Eastern Heights residents that lives in a two-story colonial, and I certainly would like you to have that capability, and I'm not alone. There are many two-story colonials in Eastern Heights, and we want to make sure that you have the best ability to fight the fires that could take place on those. I know you fought one last year, and you were able to extinguish it, so yeah, I think it's important. Thanks for mentioning it.
I will say this lastly. I did a quick query of the amount of money that we put into the ladder truck now. And it's, in the last 5 years, I want to say it's around $30,000, which is quite a bit. And I also mentioned this also on the council floor once, that I made a couple phone calls to departments that have the same age aerial and that we bought in 2009, and they all chuckled when I said, hey, how much have you put into this aerial, or the mileage? We just put a lot of miles on it. We're working it. And so compared to other models of that same year, ours is, it's beat up, but it's serviceable. I'm not up here saying it's not serviceable. It's serviceable. It's in service right now. It's just that we got to get it into reserve status so we can continue getting its life out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Lundy.
Yeah, if I could just add, I just think it's important that we hold the county accountable, that, they made a commitment to the communities, and I still think that, our message to the county commissioners should be to honor your commitment to the city of Elyria. Also, they're engaged in litigation right now. I think there's certainly strength in numbers, but, and I understand the chief's concerns, and I have those same concerns. But I think there's a point where we should at least hold the county accountable to the commitment that they've made to this city, and there is litigation. And if there's a window of time where we can take a look at it and see how this is going to work out. But I think their strategy, quite frankly, is divide and conquer. And but it's I will admit we got an uphill climb.
I agree. One of the things that I have to work on with the director I was just given today was that some communities are they're creating an ordinance or a resolution, pretty much asking what the director has said, to hold them accountable. I will also say this, that I found out last week, Thursday, I think it was, from the Sheriff's Committee, that the company that did the mission critical, they have backed out totally of doing anything with the county. And what that means is that we're starting from square one as far as the county. And so that's a problem. I guess if anything, and last is, sometimes I am an impatient person. The mayor knows that. He knows that I'm impatient, but I worry about the safety of my men every time they go to another city. And I want to hold the county accountable because there was a deal in place, that was utilizing that, but I don't know. I just don't see it happening. But that's the pessimist in me.
Thank you, Chief. Either the mayor or the finance director, just to kind of confirm for the ARPA funds. So right now you have appropriated $4,463,610, which would be item, I don't know what line item it's just.
We've appropriated, yes, that's correct.
So
There's $7,814,124 left to appropriate.
Just to confirm, can you tell me what that 4.4 is? It's in that budget?
Yes.
Chairman, that's actually, I'm not, if I can explain. The blue column that you're seeing up there with the 4,463,000, that was the amount that we presented at the last finance meeting. So we've added the 205,438 from the muni court request.
Okay.
So I apologize, I probably should have put the blue column in between the yellow and the gray, but the current appropriation in ARPA is
I got
this.
you.
this-
Okay.
The 4 million.
All right, I stand corrected, yes.
Yeah, you want a breakdown of that?
Yeah, just if you can, just to kind of, just to see what's being
In
considered.
the Public Health Community Violence Department, there's 114,844 appropriated. In the Negative Economic Impact Home Beautification Program, 250,000. That was a carryover from last year. Negative Economic Impact Essential Services, 231,141. Yeah, I believe that was a carryover. Revenue Replacement Muni Court, 229,611. Revenue Replacement Fire, 1.5 million. Revenue Replacement Police, 1.5 million. Revenue Replacement Parks and Rec, 250,000. Revenue Replacement Streets, 241,452. And I believe those are trucks that were carried over for the most part. Revenue Replacement Miscellaneous, 200,000. And Negative Economic Impact Essential Services Capital, 150,000. That was the carryover for the kitchen at the Neighborhood Alliance. That was approved last year. So that totals 4,669,048.
Finance Director Plesky, the $200,000 for the professional services, what does that entail, or if the mayor wants to weigh in on that, what is that?
Yeah, most of these revenue replacement pieces are just things that can be used to strengthen the general fund. So, and miscellaneous general government is kind of like a catch-all for what doesn't fit with other categories. The real thing to look at is this operating and maintenance, 200,000. So anything that would have traditionally been spent out of miscellaneous general government for the general fund, this could be used instead of tapping into the general fund. The other piece that I wanted to make sure I echoed at the beginning, the essential services piece, those are also carryovers based upon agreements that have already been signed, and some of those groups are still in planning, some of them are executing, but that carried over to this year as well, but those are already agreements.
Right.
Chairman?
What?
Through you. So we have all the proposed budgeting for ARPA, and after that, we have 7.3 million in ARPA funds available after that budgeting. Is that correct?
Through you, after what I just read, those departments that are appropriated, there's still 7,814,124 left to appropriate.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to do a little quick math here, if you would, please. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So if we were to add an additional 500,000 to police and fire, 1.5 million to sanitation, which would allow us to purchase 3 new trucks trucks and freeze sanitation rates. $2 million to pay for the needed improvements for the fire department, the radios and the truck. That totals $4.5 million. That would still leave us $3.3 million in, roughly, in ARPA dollars to carry throughout the year as a backup for our budget, in addition to in addition to our general fund carryover that we have in '23.
Yes, I mean, if you take that 4 million, yeah, you would have 3.3 was it?
3.3 roughly.
Yep.
Additional carryover that we could dedicate to other projects, whether that be streets or, I know the mayor and Ms. Davis have talked about water fund, some water fund things to help control rates as well, that we could look at it that way.
So I think that would be more sewer than water, because water.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I apologize.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah,
Mayor Whitfield?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll just again, I just want to kind of reiterate our thoughts and philosophy around this is to re-engage the community and make sure they have a voice in terms of, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity we received as a city with these ARPA funds, that we really be thoughtful about where's the city going to be in 40 years and how can these resources help us get there. The other piece that we're working with finance on is some of these sort of things that we had to do no matter what, sort of status quo maintenance things we had to do. There's creative ways that we can pay for those that we've done traditionally, whether that's bonding, whether that's getting loans and then paying back those loans. And so what we plan to do once the budget is approved is really work on a financial package that would cover, as I mentioned before, not just, and Chief Pronesti joked about it earlier, but it needs to be talked about, a fire station or a satellite safety station, the evidence building, the pool, the community center. There's more vehicles, these radios, the CMG. So there's a comprehensive piece of investments we need to make as a city. And I see the American Rescue Plan Act as we engage the residents on other things that they want to see. I see the American Rescue Plan Act as a potential down payment on the future of those sort of major expenses.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Does anybody have any questions for the administration or finance director with reference to the budget? Ms. Davis?
Through you, Chair. And you mentioned, Ms. Pelesi, that it was, I have to get the exact number for miscellaneous. I don't like that word miscellaneous. Can we kind of itemize what that, was it 100,000 spent for?
Miscellaneous, well, part of that would be to pay Whit O'Brien, which is the company that is coaching us on what we can spend ARPA funds or not on. Other things would be that we take out of miscellaneous general government would be like street lighting, professional services of various kinds. I don't really have an itemized list of what it's appropriated for, but last year I think we appropriated $500,000, didn't use any of it. So, but Whit O'Brien, that's one of the expenditures that we can use it for. That they're consulting with us on ARPA funds itself, and we can use ARPA funds to pay them. So.
Ms. Davis?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Also, I see on here where you had Route 57 to replace the lights, and I don't know what happened to the Gateway corridor. They knock them down all the time. Has one been laying down on the corner of Furnace and Lake Avenue for 5 months now? So are they included in this light repair?
That number came from Larry Showalter, who's in charge of traffic lights and communications. So I can't answer that question, whether that's included or not. You'd have to get with Larry, I guess, or the Safety Service Director, but that's what they requested for, actually, they requested 50,000 for replacement light poles. And most of their poles that they replace are on 57, so. I don't know, I mean, the other streets may be covered by Ohio Edison, I don't know.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Does anybody else have any further discussion? Okay. All right, very good. Again, this has to pass by the end of the month of March, so I think we'll be under that timeline. Again, please speak with the administration, finance director in regards to what's being, presented here before this budget here tonight. And then eventually we'll be moving it forward to the next finance committee meeting for approval. So there's hearing no business before this committee. I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Sarah.
Second.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Any further discussion?
Question?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Jack.
All right.